In Appalachia, folks know there are certain rules that you need to respect if you want Appalachia to respect you. Things like if you heard someone calling your name or whistling, no, you didn't. If you caught something out of the corner of your eye, no, you didn't. If you feel something that makes you a little nervous, or maybe the entire woods go quiet, no, it didn't. You kind of getting it? Well, one particular grandmother respected every single one of those rules and made history because of it. Emma Gatewood was born in 1887, the 12th of 15 children. She grew up in a very poor, rural area in Ohio. Her family moved around a lot to different farms, trying to find a way to make ends meet. By the time she was 18, she was holding down a job. And that's how she met the guy that she ended up marrying. I'ma just call him P. They got hitched in the spring of 1907. She took care of the house, their 11 kids, took care of the backbreaking work around the farm, and his dumbass. But before that, they were, quote, married just 3 months before he drew blood. And he never stopped. After the first time, Emma desperately wanted to leave. Where was she going to go? She lived in a world run by men, where women had no rights. So, just like too many other women, she stayed and suffered in silence. The woods and mountains were her refuge. She took long, solitary walks to get away from him, to breathe, to heal her body. Once, P was arrested for unaliving another man. Went up in front of the judge, who believed a husband should be at home supporting his wife and children, and dropped the fucking charges. Never mind that it was her actually supporting the family. Nearly every day for 30 years, she paid for that judge's decision. On one particular night in 1939, he broke her teeth, her ribs, and very nearly unalived her. He convinced the cops to arrest her for having the nerve to throw a bag of flour at him in self-defense. The local mayor visited her in jail. When he saw the bruises and her broken body, he took her into his protection. Then in 1940, the unheard of happened when she was granted a divorce. 8 of her children were grown, so she raised the youngest 3 on her own. And she kept taking long walks. So in 1953, Emma was 66 and read a National Geographic article about this guy who had hiked from Maine all the way down to Georgia. It was like 2,000 miles, according to her. The article made the Appalachian Trail, or what folks call the AT, would be a lark. So she decided she needed another long walk, to see what he had seen. Just so's you know, folks who do that shit now are called through hikers, because they take the AT one end to the other in a single season. Off to Maine. She packed light, a homemade denim satchel with a very few supplies. She wore high-top athletic shoes called Keds, and had her glasses. Hikers today would say she was traveling ultra-light, while she was actually ultra-light. Her pack was about 15 pounds, and no high-tech. Folks today are lucky if they can do it for under 25 pounds, with high-tech. The first night on the trail went okay, but the second day she lost the trail, then broke her glasses. Later that day, she did find her way back to where she had started, where park rangers advised her to give up. And she listened. But now the trail was calling her. So 2 years later, in 1955, she took a plane to Georgia. She was going to go south to north to avoid more dumbass park ranger advice. Again, she packed light, but with better supplies, including a shower curtain as a tarp, a canteen and a Swiss Army knife, and her trusty Keds. She ate plants and fruits that she knew were safe, slept on beds made of leaves. Sometimes folks living along the trail gave her a night's shelter and some food. Other folks, not so much. Like the guy that told her she should be home taking care of her husband instead of out gallivanting. Well, he was wrong, because on September 25th, 1955, she made it to Maine. It took her 146 days and 7 pairs of Keds. She was officially the first woman to ever hike the entire Appalachian Trail alone in a single season. Now, because I like perspective, in 1948, the guy she read about that did it first, well, he finished in 124 days, 22 days faster than she did. But he was 30. She was 68 with 20-plus grandchildren. So all that in mind, you can probably imagine that people were taking notice. Reporters waited along the trail to get an interview. And they started calling her Grandma Gatewood. She never gave consistent answers as to why she was doing the hike. Most often, she said she was a widow. News spread far and wide, which is how her kids found out what she was up to. See, she hadn't told them because she was afraid they would try to stop her. 2 years later, she was about 70, and she did it again. She said that the second time was so she could enjoy it, and that made her the first person, woman or man, to hike the AT twice, alone. Yeah, well, she went ahead and did it again in 1964, which made her the first person to do it 3 times. I bet you thought that was enough for her, didn't you? Well, you thought wrong. Because between her first and second trips along the AT, she did the Oregon Trail too. Independence, Missouri to Portland, Oregon. She had meant to follow behind a train that was also making the trip. But she got the date wrong and missed the fucking thing by 2 weeks. Well, she did the AT alone. Why the fuck would she need a train for the Oregon Trail? So she got to walking and passed the train in Idaho. Look, Grandma Gatewood wasn't no joke. She was a founding member of the Buckeye Trail Association and instrumental in developing the Buckeye Trail in Ohio. Initially, it was 20 miles along the Ohio River. It has since grown to more than 1,400 miles. And it's the only long-distance hiking trail that's entirely in Ohio. Beginning in 1967, she led hikes through a 6-mile stretch of Hocking Hills, which is now a winter tradition. Today, that path where she led hikes is called the Grandma Gatewood Trail. But in 1973, she could no longer physically make the hike. I mean, she was 80 after all. But she stood at the trailhead and greeted the 2,500 people who showed up. In June of that same year, she became very sick. Her condition quickly deteriorated, and she passed in her home in 1973. In 2012, Grandma Gatewood was inducted into the Appalachian Trail Hall of Fame, and today, folks are raising funds to erect 2 statues in her honor, one at her gravesite in Ohio Valley Memorial Gardens, and the other along the Appalachian Trail. Grandma Gatewood was a huge presence, even though she was only 5'2". She was a literal trailblazer who took millions of steps and wore Keds like they were going out of style. She overcame nearly 30 years of daily DV. Totally respected the no you didn't rules. She literally threw venomous snakes off the trail with nothing more than her trusty walking stick. She carved a path in history, and all she wanted to do was take a walk.